What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix. I'm Ryan Coop here with another edition of your CFL Offseason News Roundup. The last time we did one of these was, I believe, back January 8th. And a lot of activity has happened around the CFL in the past 20 days or so as we get towards CFL free agency kicking off on February 8th. So lots of news along the way. Gonna split this one up into two separate videos just because there is a lot to touch on. So today we'll be covering all of the news from all five teams over in the West Division. And then stay tuned on Saturday. I will have a video going over all of the news for the teams out east as well. So split it up into smaller bite-sized chunks there. But they'll still be pretty sizable chunks. Because there is a lot to get through. So let's start getting into it. Let's go through the teams in alphabetical order and start off with the BC Lions, who have made a number of notable moves in the past little while. Going back to January 10th, re-signing wide receiver Lucky Whitehead to a 2-year contract extension. Whitehead was their nominee for most outstanding player in 2021. He had 932 yards, 5 touchdowns, a fantastic season for him, one of the top in the league in receiving yards. And the Lions actually making him the highest priced receiver in the CFL for this upcoming season, which, to me is well-deserved to him. Kudos to him. Fantastic player. I'm a bit surprised he did get that much, but not surprised that he is at the same time. I think he deserves it. I just wasn't sure somebody would be willing to pay him that. So kudos to Lucky Whitehead, back in a BC uniform for 2 more years. They also extended defensive back TJ Lee, who has played 94 career games with BC and should crack the 100 mark this season. Was a West Division All-Star in 2021, had 83 tackles. Signing a couple of wide receivers, Ardarius Stewart and Josh Pearson. Stewart was on the Bombers practice roster in 2021. And Pearson playing one game with Tampa Bay in the NFL in 2020, most of the games on the practice roster there. Bit of a coaching hire here. The BC hiring former Montreal Alouettes defensive lineman John Bowman as their defensive line coach, a guy who played 14 seasons with Montreal, 2-time CFL All-Star, 9-time Eastern All-Star. That's a pretty darn good hire to have him leading your defensive line there. So nice pickup there for the Lions coaching staff. A couple smaller moves here, adding defensive back Kyle Clarat, defensive back Quincy Moje. Clarat, 4 seasons, local kid, I believe, spent some time with the Langley Rams in the BC Football Conference. Moje, some time on some NFL practice rosters, played in the U.S. Spring League most recently. Also, as we move along, about a week ago today, signing wide receiver Zach Parker, running back Darius Clark. Parker, 2 games with Montreal in 2019, played in the aforementioned Spring League in 2020. Clark spent some time in the preseason with Carolina in the NFL in 2021. Then we get into some bigger pieces here again. January 21st, the Lions releasing wide receiver Lamar Durant, a national wide receiver. He's played 6 seasons in the CFL, 4 with Calgary, the last 2 with BC. Breakout season for him in 2019. 810 yards, 5 touchdowns. But a bit of a fallback year, just 263 yards in 8 games in 2021. I know he missed a good chunk of it due to injury. And then probably the biggest news of all for the Lions, quarterback Michael Riley announcing his retirement after 11 seasons in the CFL, 168 career games, 2 championships. He's won MOP once in 2017. He was the Grey Cup MVP in 2015. 14th most career passing yards among quarterbacks all time. Can't say enough good things about the career of Michael Riley. In fact, if you missed it, go back, check out yesterday. I put out a video highlighting his top 13, in honor of him wearing number 13, top 13 fantasy performances of all time. put a bit more of a highlight on his career. All the best to him in retirement, and now with him out of the way, now Nathan Rourke takes over as the starting quarterback for 2022. This was something I had talked about a couple weeks ago here on the channel when I did the kind of quarterback preview for free agency, that this might happen. And sure enough, it does. Rourke has been named the starter for this season for the Lions, and I'm super pumped to see this. He played 13 games, started 2 of them in 2021, 754 yards passing for him, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 111 yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns, and had one of the highest fantasy totals of the season in his final week game against the Edmonton Elks. I believe 3 rushing touchdowns and a couple through the air potentially in that game. Massive game for Nathan Rourke. I'm really excited to see what he does. Canadian kid getting the start at quarterback in this coming season. And, he's got some great weapons available to him, because just earlier today, the Lions announcing the big one. Wide receiver Brian Burnham signed to an extension by BC. He's played 7 seasons with the Lions. He's 5th all-time on the team in receiving yards. 4-time 1,000-yard receiver. He got close in the shortened season this year. He's a 4-time All-Star. 965 yards this past season. Yeah, Brian Burnham back with the Lions is huge. It's massive, I dare say. You've got a young quarterback in Rourke, who I believe is 23 years old, and he's got arguably the best pass receiver duo in the CFL in Burnham and Whitehead at his disposal. That's going to be very good for a young quarterback there, and I'm super pumped to watch and see how they all work together in 2022. And Burnham, longtime member of the Lions. There was some thought maybe he was going elsewhere. We got to give them props for getting this done and keeping both him and Whitehead. Now, you have to think just maybe, the not having to pay Michael Riley now that he's retired helps you out with the money there. But hey, whatever it takes to get it done. So that rounds out the moves for the Lions in the past 2 to 3 weeks. Very busy. A lot of notable moves there. Now we move on to the Calgary Stampeders. Go back to January 11th for them, signing a couple of long snappers, Tom Schnitzler and Zach Zinomirski, both nationals. Schnitzler also able to play the defensive line, I believe. Was a 2028th round pick for Hamilton, played 4 games with them in 2021. Moving on to the next day, the Stampeders bringing back former offensive lineman Derek Dennis. Played 2 different stints with Calgary from 2015 to 16, 2018 to 19. He was technically under the Elks contract in 2021, but did not play. There was some contract disputes over situations there in Edmonton, and Dennis did not play, and they would not release him. But he was finally free now once Chris Jones took over, and he has gone back to a team he knows very well and has performed very well with in the past. Same day, Stampeders also signing running back Caden Johnson, was with the BC Lions training camp in 2021. National wide receiver Colton Hunchak gets a contract extension, played 14 games, mostly as a backup in 2021, had 247 yards on 16 catches. Not a bad season for the 8th round pick in 2019 for the Stamps. Some notable re-additions on the defensive line are up next. Same day, Mike Rose and Derek Wigan both getting 2-year extensions. Rose had 7 sacks in 2021 in 13 games. Wigan, he's played 6 seasons with the Stampeders and was named a CFL All-Star in 2021. 32 tackles, 2 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. A real force to be reckoned with, this dynamic duo on the defensive line. They're back for another 2 years with Calgary. They then shifted their focus to the offensive line side of things in consecutive moves here. Sean McEwen, a 2-year extension for him. was a CFL All-Star in 2021, starting all 14 games. Ryan Sevier also getting a 2-year extension, played 11 games in 2021, and has been with the Stamps since 2018. And offensive lineman Zach Williams also getting a contract extension. Started 13 games at left guard in this past season. Third round pick in 2019 was Zach Williams. Then we move along to the final couple moves here to talk about for Calgary. Kicker Rene Paredes, who's played 10 seasons with them, has been re-signed for another. He was the West nominee for the most outstanding special teams player in 2021, and a CFL All-Star for the 5th time in his career. Had the best field goal percentage in the CFL, only missing 4 times all season long during the regular season. Of course, he did have that unfortunate end to in the playoff game there, where he missed a couple, but that is definitely not a knock on the consistency of one of the most consistent kickers in the CFL in the past decade or so, back for another season. Calgary just a couple days ago signing wide receiver Kamar Jordan to a contract extension. He's played 8 seasons with Calgary, was a West Division All-Star for the 2nd time in 2021, 767 yards, 4 touchdowns in 11 games. A fine season for him. I know he missed about a season and a half due to a bad injury, and this year was kind of his first bounce back, mostly full season, and played pretty well in the bounce back there. So happy to see him sticking around with his team there. And just earlier today, to round out the talk on the Stampeders, linebacker Fraser Sopik signed to a national signed to a contract extension. 14 games this season, was 2nd on the team with 13 special teams tackles. So a number of good moves. Seems to be most of the focus on the offensive and defensive line for Calgary, which I think is a good starting point, and some big pieces additionally locked up in Rene Paredes, Kamar Jordan there as well. Now we get into the Edmonton Elks, who have been very busy throughout the past number of weeks. They kicked things off January 11th by signing safety Jordan Hoover to a 1-year extension. 4 seasons for him in Edmonton, played 13 games this year, had 46 tackles on defense, 5 on special teams, and picked up an interception. They also added a couple more depth signings here. Running back Treyon Gray spent briefly some time with the Argos in late 2020, and spent some time with the Cleveland Browns in 2019. And offensive lineman Jahair Jones, who played in the Indoor Football League this past year. The next day, they added a couple more additions here as well. Linebacker Matthew Thomas and quarterback Kai Loxley. Matthew Thomas, 1 game with Saskatchewan this past season, where he had 2 special teams tackles, and Loxley was a late training camp cut by the Miami Dolphins in 2021, where they used him as a receiver, not a quarterback. So, Edmonton, Chris Jones bringing in a quarterback who's played some receiver. What position is he going to play? You never know with the good old Chris Jones carousel. Maybe we'll see him at defensive back. Who knows? Some coaching changes for the Elks come next. Anthony Vitale added as the offensive line coach. Brandon Isaac as the defensive backs coach. Isaac did play 7 seasons in the CFL and has been coaching high school for the past number of years. Also bringing back defensive line coach Demetrius Maxey, linebacker coach Cam Robinson for another season. Robinson has prior experience with Jones in Saskatchewan. Maxey has been with Edmonton for 5 seasons. They hired Sammy Gahagan as the new director of U.S. Scouting, who spent some time with Montreal, BC, and Saskatchewan in similar roles. And Tyrone Robinson as strength and conditioning coach, who was with Saskatchewan from 2016 to 18 in a similar role there as well. Among these changes, they have also announced the departure of defensive coordinator Noel Thorpe, who is, I always think, one of the top defensive coordinators in the game, but Chris Jones is coming over. You know he's going to want to manage that defense by himself there, so no Noel Thorpe in Edmonton. We'll see if he lands somewhere else. The Elks continuing with some more depth moves here, signing defensive back Christian Angulo, defensive back Javonte Dean, wide receiver Raphael Leonard, and quarterback Khalil Tate. Angulo, a few stints on NFL practice rosters, did sign with Winnipeg last year but was cut. Dean also was cut by the Bombers in 2021. Leonard signed with BC after 2019 but was released before the season started. And Tate, another guy, he's listed as a quarterback but spent time as a wide receiver in the NFL with Philadelphia in 2020 and 2021. So who knows where Chris Jones will utilize him. A couple of notable receivers for the Elks got contract extensions on January 20th. National Tavon Smith and National Mike Jones each get a one-year extension. Smith had a fantastic breakout year his first season with Edmonton in 2019. 632 yards, 6 touchdowns that season for him, but a bit of a step back. Just 324 yards and no touchdowns in 2021. I know he was a backup rotating in and out for a couple of games. Mike Jones had a good start to the season with Edmonton. I thought his 5th season in the CFL after playing 4 with Hamilton. 394 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 11 games for him this season. It seemed to trail off a bit from the hot start down the stretch. Some more moves on January 21st as the Elks signed offensive lineman Matt Womack and defensive lineman Kingsley Opara. Womack played 41 games and started 15 of them at the University of Alabama. And Opara signed with Montreal this past season but was released before training camp. Has played 1 career game in the CFL with Toronto in 2019. Then we get into some bigger news here in the past week or so for Edmonton. On January 24th, signing running back James Wilder Jr. to a 1-year contract extension. 12 games, 770 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 226 yards, and a touchdown through the air for Wilder this season. A great year for him, so much that he was named the most outstanding player of the Edmonton Elks and brought back for another season here. I'm not going to lie, I was a bit surprised because I thought we saw some real good things from Walter Fletcher in the games he played there and thought maybe, the Elks would go that direction, save some money here, spend it on other positions. But we'll see Wilder back again this season, and we'll see whether we get that 1-2 punch. On January 25th, the Elks named their new president and CEO, Victor Cooey. Born in Edmonton, sports marketing and promotions executive, and he built Asia's largest global sports media platform called One Championship, broadcasting MMA to 150 plus countries, and has different experience managing different things, and as a corporate communications guy. I think this is a home run hire for Edmonton. It seems to be a guy, local guy, seems to, be involved in a lot of the things they kind of need right now. They need the marketing, they need the promotions, the communications. They need to try to get people back into the stands there. I think this was a home run pick. Seems like a guy who's passionate about the team and about sports and everything involved with it. So kudos to the Elks for getting this one right. Then we get into probably the most confusing day of the CFL offseason thus far when on January 26th, the Edmonton Elks signed wide receivers Adarius Bowman, Emmanuel Arsenault, and Caleb Hawley to contracts. Now, these are all very big names, certainly, but the most intriguing thing is none of these guys played last season. And in the case of Adarius Bowman, has not played since 2018. He did last play with the Alouettes that season, but before then spent 7 years with Edmonton, 3-time CFL All-Star, led the league in receiving yards, I believe, a couple of seasons as well. Manny Arsenault, 9 seasons in the CFL, most of them with BC, but did play with the Riders in 2019. Ended up going to the Indoor Football League this past season. He's back in the CFL now. And Caleb Hawley, last played with Ottawa after playing 3 seasons with Saskatchewan before that. 2019 with the Red Blacks, had 487 yards on 48 receptions. So some very interesting hires here for the team. A lot of people questioning what Chris Jones was doing here. I'm interested to see what this roster looks like after training camp, because I don't think it's a lock that these guys are necessarily making the team. Honestly, I could see maybe a scenario like how Naaman Roosevelt worked out here in Winnipeg, where he was brought in halfway through the season. Everybody was waiting to see him play. He ended up just being on the practice roster, being a veteran presence for some of the younger receivers. And I wonder if that's part of the culture that Chris Jones is bringing back here, is some of these guys that are proven stars in this league, proven winners, and can help out some of the younger guys. So I like the moves if these guys can still play at the level they have previously. A couple more moves on the same day, adding defensive backs Matthew Elam and defensive lineman Daniel Ross. Both spent some time in the NFL, 41 and 21 career games respectively across the NFL. Both have also played a little bit in the CFL with Saskatchewan, although in Ross's case that was just 1 game. Elks signed a bunch of additional players as well the same day. I won't go through them all. None of them super standout notables from around the CFL. And then on the 27th, releasing 10 different players. A couple notable names in this list include Jonathan Mincy at defensive back. I've thought he's been a great player there. Kicker Hugh O'Neill, who's been with the Elks organization for a long time, are the most notable among this list to me. And then getting into just today, signing quarterback JT Barrett and wide receiver Pharaoh McKever. Barrett spent time on practice rosters around the NFL. So did McKever, who also spent some time in the XFL in 2020. So that's been all of the signings and transactions for Edmonton as of late. They did also make one trade a couple of weeks ago, back on the 14th of January, trading defensive lineman Mike Moore to Montreal for offensive lineman Tony Washington and running back kick returner Martese Jackson. Moore has been with Edmonton the last 4 seasons, and 17 sacks, 48 games. That's a big piece they're sending over to the Alouettes. But they're bringing back Tony Washington, who was with them for about 3 or 4 years, back when Chris Jones was with the Elks. He's played 129 career regular season games, so a ton of experience there. And then Martese Jackson has also previously been with Edmonton for a couple of seasons. Played 3 games in 2021 with Montreal. Also signing the same day as that, they did sign their offensive lineman, 7th round pick in 2020, Nicholas Sumac. So that's everything on the Edmonton side of things. Like I said, busy couple of weeks for them. The big hire at president is, of course, the most notable and exciting. Some big pieces also along the way re-signed, and some fresh new, or I guess fresh old is what I would say, pieces in the likes of Bowman, Arsenault, and Hawley. Now we go to the 2 teams along the prairies to continue going through the West Division here. Let's start with Saskatchewan Roughriders. On January 10th, defensive lineman A.C. Leonard got a 2-year contract extension. He had a fantastic year with 11 sacks in 11 games. Also had a couple fumbles, an interception along the way. A big season for A.C. Leonard, back for 2 more years on that D-line. Last update on the Riders, I mentioned Braden Lenius had been released to pursue NFL opportunities. He has since signed with the Atlanta Falcons down south, so kudos to him for getting an NFL contract there, and we wish him nothing but the best. The Riders signed offensive lineman Taron Vaughn to a 1-year extension. Played 15 games 2 seasons ago, before missing this season with a shoulder injury, one of the many pieces missing a lot of time due to injury this year for Saskatchewan. They also extended defensive lineman Charbel DeBeyer, who has played 25 career games with Saskatchewan and has 2 sacks and 17 tackles along the way. Running back kick returner Jamal Morrow had a solid season in 2021 and earned himself a contract extension. 8 games during the season, 2 in the playoffs. Ended up over 1,000 yards, over 1,200, I believe, of all-purpose yards in the return game, not counting a little bit on offense as well. I think he's one of the most exciting, fresh returners in the CFL, and great piece to bring back here. I would love to see him get rotated in at running back with William Powell as well. Some more moves on January 13th as they signed offensive lineman Kajon Armstrong, who spent time on their practice roster in 2021, and running back kick returner Shamar Moreland, who has spent the last 4 years in Arizona at playing university ball there. Then we get into some bigger pieces in the coming days there. January 14th, signing wide receiver Kyron Moore to a contract extension. 3 seasons in Saskatchewan for him. A fine season this year with 585 yards, 3 touchdowns in 11 games. Locking up one of their national wide receivers a couple days later, Justin McInnes, their first-round pick in 2019. Gets a 6.6 games this year, had 83 yards. He gets a contract extension. We'll see what he does this coming year if he can build off of that from his second season. And then just a day later, also sticking at wide receiver Shaq Evans, who missed most of the season with a broken leg, played 7 games, 220 yards in 2021. He gets a contract extension. Obviously a down year for him. Big disappointment after, being such an explosive receiver the couple years before. Let's see how he bounces back after, a full offseason to heal that leg. I think this is great for the Riders to get these pieces and Moore and Evans back for another season. I think those are some pieces you can build your wide receiving core around. Moving along quickly here on January 19th, signing offensive lineman Natai Rogers, who spent time with Ottawa in 2021, played 4 games with them there. Also has some previous experience, 10 games with Montreal in 2018. On January 20th, they re-signed wide receiver Jake Hardy to an extension. The national receiver played 14 games and led the team in special teams tackles. Didn't really get involved too much on offense, but had a nice solid bounce back season after missing 2 years with a knee injury. It's always great to see guys make their way back into the lineup from long injuries like that, and best to him in 2022. The Riders on same day signed defensive back Amari Henderson, who signed with the Minnesota Vikings in 2021, played 1 preseason game with them. And then just the next day, signing defensive back Mike Edom to an extension. He's played 4 seasons with Saskatchewan, 5 games this year, missed most of the year due to injury. I believe it was in the Banjo Bowl game against the Bombers he went down, but had 11 tackles, a forced fumble. Didn't earn a West All-Star nomination just 2 seasons before that, though, so a nice piece to add back to that defensive backfield for Saskatchewan. Speaking of the defensive backfield, they, a couple days later, as we move to January 24th, signed defensive back Will Sunderland, who spent some time on NFL teams and played a couple preseason games there this year, while also adding wide receiver Darvin Kidsey, who played 5 regular season games with Washington in the NFL in 2018 and 19, and spent some time on Seattle's practice roster this year. So a couple guys with some NFL experience brought in there. And then most recently, rounding out the Riders update is just finalizing their coaching staff and football operations staff for this season. We know Chris Jones is the head coach. We know he's the general manager. We knew he was probably going to handle some defensive impact, defensive duties there. I I don't know what I'm talking about. Chris Jones is not in Saskatchewan anymore. I talked so much about him earlier that I forgot about that. Craig Dickinson's the head coach in Saskatchewan. Jeremy O'Day is the manager there. And they're bringing back a lot of the same crew here. Offensive coordinator Jason Maas, who joined the Riders in 2021 after a couple seasons as head coach in Edmonton. He's back as OC once again. Defensive coordinator Jason Shivers is back. He's been the defensive coordinator the past 2 years as well. And assistant GM Paul Jones is back once again. 3 seasons with the Riders, but 34 overall in the CFL and a 5-time Grey Cup champ. Yeah, that's a pretty nice piece to have working with you there to build your team. 2-year extensions for all of these guys here. They also announced the rest of their coaching staff for this season. You got special teams coordinator Kent Margery, who was the quality control coach for a while, running back coach for a while, and was a special teams assistant last season. Running backs coach Kelly Jeffrey, who spent some time with the Elks in 2020. Offensive line coach, run game coordinator Steven Sorrells was in the same role as 2021. Travis Moore at wide receiver coach, Dayon Melvin at linebacker coach, Ben Olsen as defensive line, all back once again in their same roles as last season. Along the football operations staff, 2019 director of player personnel and 2021, I guess, Kyle Carson gets a promotion to assistant general manager. Jordan Greenlee gets a promotion to manager of football operations. Nick Boley, the manager of video analytics. Chase Pelletier, football operations coordinator. Gordon Gilroy, manager of equipment. Ryan Raftis, head athletic therapist. And Clinton Spencer, strength and conditioning trainer. So rounding out the rest of the staff there in Saskatchewan. Again, sorry for the miscommunication there earlier. Chris Jones is not in Saskatchewan. He's in Edmonton. Yes, got that mixed up, but we're back on track. So much CFL news to go through in the past couple of weeks, and we're only doing the West Division today. Stay tuned for the East tomorrow. Let's round it out with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the defending champs, on January 10th. Defensive back DeAndre Alford was released a couple days prior to pursue NFL opportunities, ended up signing with the Atlanta Falcons, so he'll join Braden Lenius over there. Following that, Bombers continued to do some work on the offensive line. Pat Neufeld got a 1-year extension after being a CFL All-Star in 2021. Spent the last 7 years in Winnipeg. Offensive lineman Chris Kolinkowski also got an extension. Was on the practice roster most of the season after playing a few years in Toronto. A couple more guys getting released for NFL opportunities. Jonathan Kongbo was released for such a reason back on January 12th. And Drew Desjardins was a couple weeks later as well. I don't believe Kongbo has signed with anybody quite yet, or he may have signed with Denver. I know there were some rumors around that, but I do not recall if that has been confirmed. On January 13th, signing fullback Mike Miller to a 1-year contract extension. He's the CFL all-time leader in special teams tackles and has spent the last 4 years in Winnipeg, 10 seasons overall in the CFL. Couple more depth moves here. Linebacker Jesse Briggs gets another 1-year contract. 6 seasons in Winnipeg, 104 games for him. A nice fine season in 2021 where he rotated in a little more at linebacker after primarily being a special teams guy throughout his career. I mentioned Drew Desjardins, being released for NFL opportunities. That leaves room for offensive lineman Jeff Gray, who gets a 2-year extension. He spent the last 3 years in Winnipeg. Did start 12 games in 2019, but was not a starter this past season. Dressed for 5 games only there. So I think it's his time. He's been patiently waiting his time. He's a talented guy. I believe a local guy, or spent some time at the University of Manitoba at least. And now he gets a shot with the Bombers, and I think should slot into a starting role. Linebacker Shane Gauthier also getting a 1-year extension, 63 games with the Bombers over 5 seasons for him. And then we go to a 2-day span that may have been 2 of the greatest days outside of Grey Cup victories in recent Bomber history. January 20th, 2022, things start off with linebacker Adam Bighill, the CFL Most Outstanding Defensive Player in 2021, getting a contract extension. 3-time winner of that aforementioned reward. Fantastic year with him, 70 tackles, number of turnovers, and a touchdown for him. And then later the same day, bringing back MOP and Grey Cup MVP quarterback Zach Collaros on a 1-year extension. Figured this was inevitable, that he would come back to the Bombers. He's been 17-2 as a starter here in Winnipeg. Why leave that? Led the CFL in touchdowns, quarterback rating, almost led in passing yards, as he earned MOP this past season. We fast forward one day where Zach Collaros actually goes and breaks this signing himself on Twitter, announcing that offensive lineman Stanley Bryant signed to a 1-year extension. Won the award for Most Outstanding Offensive Lineman this year, which he has now captured 3 of the last 4 seasons. I believe played over 100 straight games before breaking his Ironman streak this season when the Bombers rested him down the stretch. 169 career games with Calgary and Winnipeg, and back with the Bombers once again. They also recently re-signed long snapper Mike Benson to a 1-year contract extension. He's played 8 seasons in the CFL. Last time was his first one in Winnipeg, and he played all 14 games there. And to round out the Bomber news here, as I mentioned, Drew Desjardins, released to pursue NFL opportunities, has signed with the New England Patriots. 14 games this season, 18 games in 2019. So kudos and best of luck to Drew Desjardins and the aforementioned DeAndre Alford, Jonathan Kongbo, who all have been released by the Bombers to pursue those opportunities and getting a shot down south. And I hope they make the most of it and wish them nothing but the best. That does it for your West Division CFL offseason news roundup from the past 2 to 3 weeks. Again, so much activity. We're at 37 minutes in now, and all we've done is talk about 5 teams. But I hope the goal with these offseason updates is to give you your one-stop shop to get all of the news you may have missed in the recent weeks if you haven't been following as closely. So we went through the West today. Stay tuned tomorrow. I will go through the East Division for you, and we'll talk about everything going on with the Argos, the Ticats, the Alouettes, and the Ottawa Red Blacks. You can find that right here on the YouTube channel as well. Do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you liked, what you didn't. In the comments section, let me know, if you're a fan of any of these teams out west, or even if you're not, which teams do you like what they've done? Do you not like what they've done thus far? Let me know in the comments section there. You can also tweet me at CooperTrooper42 on Twitter. Link to that's in the description. And if you want to check out more CFL weekly content, you can check out the Canadian Football Countdown podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, or on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod. It's a weekly podcast I host there as well. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.